Hello and welcome to the Talk Show, the podcast about late night talk show culture, and I'm your host, George Grimwood. And in our inaugural episode of the reboot of the Talk Show, bearing in mind that the last episodes were recorded back in 2016, we're discussing a specific episode of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson from April the 2nd, 1979, when, in the absence of Johnny, Kermit the Frog and his fellow Muppets took over for hosting duties. Joining me tonight to discuss this episode in particular are guests Patrick Cotnoir and Connor Ratliff. Patrick Cotnoir, editorial and talent producer at Marvel, producer of Scraps, the best improv show in the world, and producer of the George Lucas Talk Show, and which during 2020 and part of 2021 was on each Sunday as part of the Planet Scum channel on Twitch. The George Lucas Talk Show is hosted by film director George Lucas, aka Connor Ratliff, who has not only acted in shows such as The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Orange is the New Black, Veep, Search Party, The Blacklist, and Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, but is also the host and creator of the fantastic podcast Dead Eyes, in which Connor sets out to solve the mystery of why Tom Hanks fired him from a small speaking role in Band of Brothers. Honestly, the first word that comes to my mind when I'm describing the George Lucas Talk Show to other people to get into it is that it has a heart and it has the time to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the humor and it's the joy of it. There's nothing cynical about it. It's joyous. It's yeah. I'm over. It's hard to describe it when you're overwhelmed with something that makes you happy on a regular basis. And I know that I'm not just speaking for myself there, you know, and it's a fantastic show, and obviously, you know, completely get that it's everyone needs a break. And to be honest, I would argue that you've probably done more, over 300 hours. Sounds like it probably is more than an actual talk show that would have been aired on television, right?
Over the last year. Yeah, no question. I think. Yeah, definitely. I haven't even thought of it that way, but yeah, it's definitely, because I can't imagine, like, you know, a lot of people take weeks off and stuff, so they probably do, like, you know, 250 shows a year or something like that. So it's definitely, maybe even less than that, could take out weekends.
I think the only shows that would maybe beat us would be like the morning shows, like Today. Because they'll do 3 or 4 hours in a morning. But they also break it up. They have a lot of people working on those. They have a lot more people spreading the effort, and they're also making a fortune making it.
Connor, do you remember in your time in the UK a early morning TV show called The Big Breakfast?
Yes, it was filmed because I was in Liverpool, and it was filmed in Liverpool down by the Mersey at that point. It was Richard and Judy, right?
Oh, so there was a couple. So there was Richard and Judy.
So the Big Breakfast. Wait, the Big Breakfast was Chris Evans.
That's
right?
The one. Yeah, yes. Chris Evans.
And Richard and Judy
America himself.
Richard and Judy is the one I was thinking of that was filmed up in Liverpool, right?
Yes, and they had like a floating atlas for the weather on it, which is still going as far as I'm aware.
My main memory of Richard and Judy was when Jerry Maguire came out, and they had Jonathan Lipnicki on the show. And I remember Richard, it was December, and and they were talking about Christmas with everybody, and Jonathan Lipnicki was there, and they're like, "Oh, I bet you're very excited about Christmas, aren't you? Little Jonathan Lipnicki says, I'm Jewish, actually." And Richard's response was so painfully, it was very Alan Partridge, like it was everything that Alan Partridge is about, of like saying the wrong thing and then trying to recover. It was like, "Oh, well, nothing wrong with that. Well, then, must be excited about Hanukkah then. Very good. And he was just very panicky and not wanting to say the wrong thing, having said the wrong thing.
Richard is very. I think there's a number of YouTube videos where Richard is very much, and rightly so, compared to Alan Partridge in a number of absolutely deeply awkward moments. Seems to be his kind of standard now. But yeah, one thing I should before I suppose we should tuck into the Muppets episode. But before I start now, Patrick, you have a reputation for taking the guest and saying on your IMDb profile.
Yes.
Now I noticed that you on your IMDb profile have a number of credits, unofficial credits, from what I can gather, as an audience member in a number of talk shows.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even think about this, but you specifically would love this one thing. Do you want me to explain it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so basically, I like to keep my IMDb, up to date, complete, as much as you can get on it, because fresh.
Tight.
I feel like it acts as a de facto resume in a way, because you can like see all of the things that I've worked on without, a lot of stuff gets cut out of the resume, even if it's, if it's not as like important to the overall, job story. So I was like, what would be funny? What would be a fun thing to add to my IMDb? And I noticed on I was looking through like a Letterman, full cast and crew or whatever. And there were some people who listed themselves as audience members. And I was like, it would be really funny to go through and put myself as an audience member for every talk show taping that I'd gone to. Because I went to a lot when I was going to college in New York. It was just like a fun, easy thing to do. Connor and I went to one. We saw Letterman and Tina Fey for his Netflix show.
Wow.
So there are a lot of appearances for, Live with Regis and Kelly and Late Night with Seth Meyers and stuff like that on there.
I am envious. From what I can gather, Conan, Fallon, Daily Show, Colbert Report, Late Show with David Letterman, Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel Live. Is there any?
The Seth? I guess the Seth one that I went to was a test show, so that's probably why that's not on there.
Fair enough.
Patrick and I also went to a Saturday Night Live taping.
We did.
Now. Who was the host of the taping?
We saw the UK's own Felicity Jones.
I should
promoting Rogue One.
I should know who that is.
Yes, she's the star. She's Jyn Erso in Rogue One. She's in, what is she in? Like The Theory of Everything. She's in a bunch of stuff. She played RBG in a movie. Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I'll tell you a bit of 90s talk show audience behind the scenes experience that I had was my first trips to New York. My grandma, my dad's mom, bought us a family trip to New York City for Thanksgiving one year, and it became a tradition where every Thanksgiving we'd come to New York City for the weekend and we'd go see a bunch of things. And the first time we did it, Letterman was doing a show, I think, on Thanksgiving. And so we got tickets and we went and saw the show. And the warm-up guy came out. This has been early 90s. So it was in the very early days of his CBS show. And the warm-up guy came out and he explained to the audience, like, listen, we know you're excited, but we want you to react genuinely. Don't do a bunch of stuff to try and like get on camera. Don't like laugh louder than you really feel it. Don't hoot and holler. Don't wave your arms. Like, we don't want any of that. We want, if you do stuff to try to get on camera, we'll boot you out of here. Like, don't like try to make a scene. And they were essentially like trying to tamp down like the enthusiasm and just keep everything balanced. The next year, Letterman had the week off, and for some reason, Leno was doing a week of shows at Rockefeller Center in New York, and I remember weirdly for the Letterman show, it was Penn and Teller were the guests. I remember they did a magic trick with giant cards that they shuffled using two forklifts. These giant metal cards. When Leno was there, David Copperfield was the guest. Remember George Clooney was the guest as well. The warm-up guy for Leno came out and said, "Hey, everybody, if you want to get on camera, you better laugh super loud. We're always going to point the camera at the people who are laughing the loudest and waving their arms and being crazy." And it was exactly the opposite. They instructed the audience to do everything that the Letterman audience was told not to do. And that's why when you watched Leno, you'd see the audience going crazy because they'd been told you might get on camera if you look like you're really, really enjoying this. And I thought, wow, This is such a fascinating glimpse behind the scenes of these two shows. And and the message that they were trying to send. And I think it's very revealing about the enthusiasm level. Like Leno was always, from a certain point, Leno always won, but people weren't as enthusiastic. Like, I think it was like one of those things where you can have a bigger audience that never talks about the show with anybody else, that never enthuses about it, or you don't have those YouTube channels. There's nobody out there who is archiving all the Leno appearances for a YouTube channel, and it's partly because of that it's like there was never the depth of enthusiasm, even if the audience itself might have been numerically bigger.
I got that impression as well when I went to a Leno recording. This was post coming back after Conan.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Adam Scott as the guest, and he was great.
Yeah.
But out of sight. So aside from the warm-up, who was like, clap, 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 there were bouncers. When he came out, there are people. So up to that point, the warm-up guy's like, oh, everyone, get involved. And then when he comes out, just before he comes out and just before the camera hits him, like 4 or 5 guys just stand in front of the audience. But then he was like coming and doing the whole high five thing.
Yeah.
But the thing is that my friend Jonathan Sloman, who I went to it with, he's quite astute to these things. He noticed that there was a couple of writers, a couple of people, a couple of folks sitting there in a wheelie desk.
Mm-hmm.
Off camera, and so Adam Scott would be here, and then the desk would be sort of off camera, sort of up here.
Mm-hmm.
So he's talking to Adam Scott, and he's like, and Adam Scott's talking, he's like, so tell us about, and that was it. And he was taking note. He was just basically taking any action from what they were telling him through a headpiece.
Interesting.
And it just. I was gutted not to get into a Craig Ferguson show. I couldn't give you the date, but obviously you'll get kind of the idea of when it was. I went back and forth into Los Angeles after around 2012 onwards, and my friend Jonathan and I, we were queuing up in Los Angeles, and it was the umbrellas, the heat, and all that in the queue. We were the last people before the gate closed, and they said, nah, that's it. Sorry. And they let us go in to get, and I bought a Craig Ferguson mug, and I was happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the guest that we found out that was on, and it turned out, from what I believe to be his last public appearance on a talk show, Robin Williams.
Oh,
wow.
And
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. There were definitely, we used to wait out a bunch to go to SNL in college, like friends from college and you'd have to wait out, like they would give out tickets at 7 a.m. and you'd have to like wait the whole day on Friday. It was such a pain to do, but it was fun and it was cool and we liked doing it. But I think there were 2 times where we didn't get in, and it just felt like you just like wasted your entire day and then had to come back on Saturday for the show, and like they would just call up like, okay, we have 6 more seats, okay, we have 2 more seats, 3 more, and all right, that's it. And then there's like 45 people who are just like, okay, well, I guess we'll just go home then and watch the show. And it's like such a bummer when that happens specifically.
The only other time that I got into an SNL taping, other than the time I was with Patrick, was at a rehearsal, and it was the rehearsal where Jude Law was the host and Ashley Simpson was the musical guest.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the infamous one where the lip syncing broke down during the live show.
Ooh.
But I was there at the rehearsal, and what I saw was she was having voice problems, and she stopped doing one of her songs like a minute into the song and was like, I can't do it. And she was just like, and what I do remember is that all of my favorite sketches that night did not make it to the final. They all got cut. When I watched the show that night, I was like, the best, objectively, the best sketches, the ones that got the best response, did not make the show. And when the lip syncing thing happened, I was like, oh, I saw the groundwork being laid for that in the rehearsal, which was like, we got to do something. Her voice is in bad shape.
Now, I know that they occasionally share the cutscenes on their YouTube channel. Were any of those shared from that night? Do you know? Or
I don't believe so. And at that
was
point,
also when was that? That was 2003.
It was pre. I think it might have been 2004.
Yeah,
but it was definitely like pre the explosion of online video. Like they would have had to upload it as a real player file or something.
So as a hypothetical, so for both of you, if you could have sat in the audience for any SNL episode, what since it began, what would you go for?
That's tough. I was there for a lot of because I also interned there for a season and a half. And there were a lot of cool I was there. There was one where it was like the 5th time that Justin Timberlake had hosted, and they did a sketch with like Chevy was there and Dan Aykroyd and Alec Baldwin and Tom Hanks and like all of the people who had Paul Simon who had hosted 5 times. Yes, Steve Martin. So I was there for like a lot of cool things like that. I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like it's boring to say one of the ones from the first 5 years, like that feels like the cop-out answer.
The 6th year, then that'd be all right.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't know, Connor. Do you have one?
Well, the one that immediately popped, there's episodes that pop up in my mind, like the when Chevy and Steve and Marty hosted as the Three Amigos, because I remember them dancing and going all over the studio. And at that age, that I would have been very like tuned into like, oh, I'd love to be there and see them do that. But I'm trying to think it probably would honestly be one where I was really excited about the musical guest, because in some ways watching the comedy live is sort of a weird behind the scenes. Depending on where you are, you don't always have a great vantage point. So part of me is like, oh, maybe the one where like U2 was there and they were like going long after the show was done.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to say. So I'm going to say whatever I'll say the one where I was going to say that the last one where Toon Says the Driving Cat was on the show, but what I'm going to say legitimately is every time SNL appears on a streaming service, the first episode that I go to see if it's up is when Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas hosted as the McKenzie brothers. And it's always like 22 minutes long. Like almost none of the episode is releasable. So I would go to that one just so I could see that episode. Because I always go to it. I don't know what music rights or what reason they can't ever release the full episode, but that would be one that I'd probably go to.
And here's what I'll say. The SNL 40th anniversary show.
Ooh, that's fun.
Or 25th, either of those. They're both good shows.
Like just where everyone's in the same place at the same time, and they all go to Dan's bar afterwards and talk about conspiracy theories and drink from his skull vodka and all that. I'll say
the second SNL at home. So basically if the genie offers me that wish, which taping would you like to be at? I'd be like, no, the first SNL at home, because I'm just like, I'm in all of those houses while they record those things. Maybe an irresponsible answer, but I assume in the scenario, I don't have COVID and neither do any of they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
SNL at home.
Or I want to be there for the Giuliani post 9/11 episode. That's the other one I want to be there for. Because we love Rudy in New York, We love him.
Yeah, that's the information that we've got to work with.
Good guy.
Did you know they call him America's mayor?
All I know is that I've been to New York twice. One was in 2002, and one was in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Both great times for Rudy. Both at the peak of Rudy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, the peak in 2016 was going to the WFMU building in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So barely involved actually New York, but the base was New York. Contacting the guys at Troma and having a tour of the Troma studios, which were just offices. And
that was in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah. This was New Jersey. This was the same day we went to WFMU. So I could be wrong. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Our friend JD Amato worked for Troma, but I think it was when they were in their offices in Manhattan.
This was definitely outside of Manhattan. But we went to the Mad magazine. We had a tour of the my friend Jonathan had a contact with the Mad magazine, so we had to walk around there, and it was lovely. And that was just before everything changed there. And then also the SNL tour, which was great fun. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely an experience to walk around there. And I genuinely, I'm so excited to come back to New York at some point when it's safe to do so. I don't know when that will be, but hopefully sooner rather than later. Because all my experiences prior to New York have been predominantly Los Angeles, and walking past certain locations where they were filming certain things, and where the Nickelodeon studio once was, and all that.
That was the sound of the Chevy Chase show hat doing a pratfall off camera.
Yeah,
never stops.
Tonight. Yeah.
We're talking a lot about SNL, and even though it's not a talk show per se, its existence does owe itself to the fact that Johnny Carson didn't want to work as many days of the week, and they were showing Tonight Show reruns on Saturday night, and he was like, I want to save those reruns for nights that I don't want to work, and so they created it to fill that gap. So it all does tie back into our core thing.
I mean, I'll be honest, this might have to be a 2-part episode because we haven't even got into the. I mean, if you guys are free, I'm more than happy to discuss further. There's a lot to cover here. There's a lot to cover.
We sort of have a tendency to go on other people's shows and make those shows longest episodes.
If you want an Irishman plus this, I'm all in. I'm all in.
We'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, I suppose I should ask my second question.
Yes.
Which was, Connor, the episode we're talking about today was originally an off-air recording from the date it aired, as far as I'm aware. With some excellent adverts included as well, like the full, which actually works quite well as a segue in a specific advert for a potential topic that we may discuss further down the line.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, would have this been one of your earliest exposures to the Muppets, or at least your earliest exposure that you've personally preserved?
No, I only saw this after I got a copy of it from Patrick. I would have been too young. What year did this air? This aired in
79.
79. I would have been too young to stay up late enough to watch it, and we wouldn't have owned a VCR at that point. So I didn't even know that this had happened until I was an adult, because it's also not the type of thing, like, until the internet got fully up and running, there's just a lot of information that, like, it wouldn't have been in any book in the library. It wouldn't have been in any book there was no Muppet book that I owned that said, oh, they also hosted an episode of the Tonight Show. I had no awareness of it. And I think there was the point where I was borrowing, Patrick had a bunch of DVD-Rs of Muppet things. And I borrowed them from him and I copied them. And then at some point I decided to upload this to YouTube. It is the most popular thing I've ever uploaded to anything, anywhere. It's more popular than anything I'll ever do. And I get emails frequently. Most of my emails, I should turn off the emails for this, because I feel like at least once a day I'll get an email saying new comment on the Muppets guest hosting the Tonight Show.
Oh, there's two guys constantly arguing, from what I can gather, about the height of, like, the logistics of the stage. I think there's one guy funny. There's one guy who said he was there on the night, and there's another going, yeah, all right, yeah, that really happened. He would have passed out by that point if it was that low. Like, there's a proper argument going on in the comments, from what I can gather.
Yeah,
that's really funny.
And I mean, the thing, so that's exclusive as far as I'm concerned, because I thought this was something you'd watched or like your family recorded. But so this is from you, Patrick.
This is from me. Now,
I'm glad that Patrick really hates that I'm the one who uploaded it and not him. But it
Right.
never occurred to him to upload it. I don't know why it didn't.
I don't know why it didn't either. I think it was probably like before I was in like a let's upload stuff to YouTube phase. You know what I mean?
I know exactly why I wanted to upload it to YouTube. Millions
us.
of people happy.
Millions of people happy.
The most Muppet reason of all.
Yeah, you're just waiting for your standard rich and famous contract.
Never.
I got this. There was this guy, and I just found his website. This guy still exists. His name is Kermi Clown, Kermi clownvideos.com.
He sampled that video.
It was a video trade thing. So like if you had videos of certain things that he was looking for, he would trade them and send you tapes of what he had. And I guess when I was a kid, I just like used to tape a bunch of like Muppet stuff if they were on a talk show or if they were, if there was some special that they were on. And I guess I like sent this guy a bunch of videotapes or DVDs of stuff that I had, and he sent me a bunch of stuff. Now, in the age of streaming right now, it's insane that this guy does not just upload everything online. Like it's clearly like he's making some money off of it, so I assume that that's why he does not. But there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, oh man, I would love to see this thing, but I don't want to spend $10 on a DVD to get it. You know what I mean?
That makes the mystery very weird, actually, because I noticed that he has posted clips from that same video separately on YouTube. Really? Yeah, Kermit Clown specifically has posted clips from that same video on YouTube. So this is where the mystery deepens further, because this is clearly a recording from Los Angeles in 1979. There are so many adverts to talk about, I should point out, in this. Just stuff that fascinates me, and we don't get anything like that over here. Bearing in mind that I'm the type of guy who's been literally waiting. I have you heard of Wimpy?
Wimpy, the hamburger chain.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know it was a chain.
There's a chain in England called Wimpy.
It's not a place that I've frequented prior to the lockdown. But I tell you what, I want a Wimpy. I want a chocolate milkshake and what they call a bender in a bun. I want the pork meat in the bun, and I want that. And as the second that I can, I'm going straight for it. But the thing is that like there are so many adverts. Like I've been watching during lockdown. I've been watching so many adverts, like old vintage adverts, and the US adverts are always so much more interesting than the UK adverts for the most part. And there are plenty in this recording. On top, of course, the content, which I suppose we should really get into. And you know what? I'm gonna before we, as a palate, not a cleanser, because we haven't mucked our palates just yet. But I'm gonna, as a palate starter. I don't know if that's a logistical thing, but I'll give it a go.
Sure.
I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. This is all a bit new to me. It's been a while. But I'm going to try and share my screen. Here we go. Right now, hopefully you can just see a photo of now for those listening who aren't looking at the video, this is allegedly it's from 1979. It's marked as it's a Muppets lunchbox with a thermos. It has what appears to be the character of Dower Hannah from Blade Runner promoting the thermos on the front on a sticker, in some shape or form. What I would like to ask of both of you, how much do you think this specific thermos and lunchbox is going for on eBay at this moment in time?
Well, I will tell you this, first of all, that I owned this exact thermos and lunchbox.
Wow.
As a child.
So what's it worth?
I did not have the sticker on it. I have no recollection of it anyway, but I remember eating many a peanut butter and jelly sandwich out of it at school. I'm gonna say a couple $100.
Yeah, I'm doing it. I should point out it's buy it now price, doing it in dollars, not excluding shipping. So,
and is there any rust on the sides of it at all?
It looks pretty good.
But oftentimes those sides are where the rust happens, you know?
From the other photos I've seen, it's pretty much in mint condition.
Yeah, I'm going to say $399. Buy it now.
$399 from Connor. Okay.
I'm going to say $99.99.
Oh, okay. I can confirm. So this is 1 out of 6, by the way. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm gonna point out. This is where I bring up my price list here. $199.95.
All right.
That goes to this guy closest without going over. Price is right rules, baby.
Patrick, you have it for the first one. For the first one, you got it. Yes. Well done. But there's 5 more opportunities in this time. Now these are all going to be related. Now I should point out these are all going to be related to things that are going on in. I'm going to stop sharing that now. There we go.
Right.
But yeah, these are all going to be related to things that have that happen, that occur, or are in relation to the show. So first of all, we have the opening monologue. Now, there's a few moments in the monologue of Kermit where it feels like it's. Now, do you feel it's intentionally awkward, like the jokes don't land and they're kind of doing the best they can with it? Or do you feel that it's part of the process with Fozzie? Like, was Fozzie always going to come on, or was that something that you think that they kind of improvised at the time in relation to the reaction?
My guess is Fozzie was always going to come on, just because from a technical standpoint, I imagine having to improvise the framing of Fozzie coming in and everything would be too difficult for them to do. And it gives them that second beat of the joke. You know what I mean? Like, it gives them something else to do, because Kermit didn't seem like he really had an end to that monologue without Fozzie coming in. Maybe I'm Connor. Maybe I have a different opinion, but that's my gut.
No, I agree. I think it was now there may have been. I think there are parts of this episode that are more outlined than scripted, particularly once we get into the more conversational parts of the show. But I think I'd be stunned if that wasn't a planned beat of the monologue, because I think it also makes perfect sense to have Fozzie come in. As far as the awkwardness, and I think this is true throughout the episode, I think this is an era of TV when there was more room for talk shows were less polished, and that is for good and for bad. I think mostly more for good than for bad, because I actually think that the highs are higher in a talk show when you know that there's always the possibility that a bit might fall flat, whereas I feel like we live in an age now where there's a lot of very polished and watchable talk shows that are not necessarily compelling viewing, because you sort of get the sense that everything's going to go pretty well.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I shouldn't make a sports analogy, but like if you're guaranteed to make almost every shot because the basket is at a height where it's relatively easy to make those shots, it's not very thrilling to watch. There has to be some degree of difficulty in order to get that real satisfying feeling of watching people at the top of their game. They need to be capable of making jokes that don't land, and I think that's what you get. I think it makes all because you also don't necessarily remember, like, we're analyzing it, but you don't necessarily, the casual viewer will only remember the best parts of this episode at the time. They'll be like, oh, it was so funny when the Muppets were on, you know?
Yeah. And I don't want to, even from our analysis, I don't want to drag away from the fact that it's a deeply, the whole thing is encompassing as a comfort zone. It's nostalgia, it's gorgeous, and it's fantastic. It's a lovely, optimistic and joyous preservation of nostalgia. And it's
also they're the Muppet Show is designed, everything about the Muppet Show is designed to work for the Muppets. They're having to come into someone else's studio and figure out a way of doing so. It's very fascinating to watch from the perspective of them as guests in someone else's show, because they can adjust some things, but try to imagine if Johnny Carson had to go do a half hour of television using only the Muppet Show sets. He probably would have been like, oh, how do I make this show work. Like it's a very tricky thing.
And it was also not something that they were doing that often. Like 90 minutes of live comedy in front of a real audience is not something that they would be doing normally. If they're going on a talk show, they have their like 7-minute segment that's like very beaten out with producers and stuff saying what they're going to talk about. But like this is so different in that it was like at points. It's very interesting watching Jim Henson's interview style. It happens a lot where he'll just be like, was there anything else you want to talk about? Like, or are there any other animals you want to talk? Like, it's not like a real question. It's just like, I don't have anything, but I need to keep this conversation going, which in a way sometimes reminds us of what happens on George Lucas, where it's like, we don't have these interviews planned out and we will hit a point where it's just like, I don't know. How was your day? What'd you do today? Like, it's just something to keep the conversation moving ahead, even if it's not like a good quote unquote question. But I feel like that happens multiple times in this one. He keeps asking the animal guy about different animals. And then there was one more.
The hypnotizing.
Yeah.
Do you remember where it doesn't land, where he doesn't realize that Gonzo's hypnotized and the chicken's Camilla's trying to point it out?
Yeah. It does feel like the biggest runner through the episode of improvised thing. Maybe it was not improvised, but it feels improvised. The way everyone keeps ragging on Kermit about Piggy announcing that they're getting married. And by the end, when he's just like, stop talking about it to Gonzo, like it feels genuine, maybe that they didn't plan it and that everyone just realized it was a fun thing. So let's keep up with it.
Yeah. And Animal picks up the pace. When Animal turns up during the Bernadette Peters segment.
Yeah.
I felt that the pace and the kind of just the general energy picked up a lot more with the audience as well. And even just him doing nothing.
The animal segment, I think, is the funniest segment of any of the like characters crashing the interview or whatever. It feels like he gets the most laughs out of any of them.
Do you think it's surprising that Kermit, given the fact that for years he has worked as a journalist on Sesame Street, that his interview style would be something that feels like he's not polished at?
I got the impression that he was often stumped by responses from various
one thing that's really interesting to me is that, and I don't know what the monitor situation would have been for Jim Henson or Frank Oz, but that like they've worked with guest hosts in scripted scenes, but improvise, like even when Jim Henson goes on as a guest with Johnny Carson, he's sitting there on the chair holding Kermit, and he can look, even though the conversation is between Kermit and Johnny, Jim Henson himself is able to look Johnny Carson in the face directly. And it makes me wonder, when you're doing an interview and you're crouched under a desk and you're holding a puppet up, what that does, because I feel like some of the awkwardness comes from the fact that like doing a puppet talk show, a lot depends on what the monitor situation feels like and how natural it feels to be doing the full puppeteering work while also reacting in real time to a guest. Because there's a certain amount of physical disconnection that I think makes the degree of difficulty much harder than if you were just playing a character in a suit and interacting with someone where you could look them in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
I felt. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I felt the choreography in terms of when Animal turned up and he was kind of panting, and then you had Kermit there. I felt that Jim felt more comfortable having him there to kind of continue it. There's a point where the laughter of Kermit feels like Jim rather than Kermit in character, and that felt. I got the impression he felt more relaxed knowing that he had someone there to kind of like deflate
take the pressure off of him.
Yeah.
It also felt like there were some microphone issues throughout, particularly with Frank Oz. Whenever Frank Oz would come in, you kind of think, oh well, Piggy isn't quite as on mic as Kermit is.
Yeah, which was weird. It was surprised. Like, it was one of those things that, coming from a television production background, like if that happened on the Gethard show or something, they would have fixed it immediately. And I'm like, this wasn't even live. It was taped. Like, it was live to tape. Why would you not just fix that? Like, you could have easily picked up, I think it was from Piggy's entrance. She like does the thing, comes out of the curtain, and then walks over to the desk, quote unquote, walks over to the desk. And I'm like, you just fix it before she walks over to the desk, or take it up again. Like, I don't know. It was just surprising that no one hopped in to fix that throughout the night and give him a new mic.
I should point out that I'm only 70 episodes into the Chris Gethard show. I'm currently binging it over the last year, so no spoilers. I'm only up to I don't know how Connor's presidency debate will turn out. I don't. I'm looking forward to finding out the outcome.
How many episodes are you into it?
I'm only a few episodes after the great debate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you said 70 for some reason. And I was like, oh no, that's.
Well, it was, I suppose. I mean, between 60 and 70. But even then, that's I'm still in the public.
You got a while.
Yeah. I've seen a young Patrick walk by a few times, and and I thought I tell you, an episode that stuck out for me actually was the one that was recorded before the show starts. Like, I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was like a Larry Sanders episode, and I, and not knowing when, not knowing what was kind of like being put on and what wasn't. That was very interesting. But yeah, I
remember that one being pretty realistic to what we ended up doing. I had a conversation today with someone. I was talking to them on the phone, and Gethard show came up. It was someone who like works in a similar field to me. And he goes, oh, I came to an episode. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's cool. Which episode did you come to? He goes, I was on an episode. Connor, I don't even know if you remember this one. He goes, it was an episode where they videotaped us playing basketball, and then we just talked over it. And I was on the basketball team. And I was like, did you know that is famously one of the worst episodes of the show that we've ever done? And he did not know. And he was like, I take that as a badge of honor that I was part of one of the worst ones.
I also disagree. I found that episode very watchable.
There you go.
I found it calming. Yeah. That's one I've seen. I mean, right. I'm not a sports person, but what worked for me was knowing the people involved. And that's what made it fun. And recently on Planet Scum, I know that on Saturday Not Live, they showed kind of the evolution of Vacation Jason, and showed snippets of American Gethard. And I do strongly feel that deserves a Kickstarter in its own right, to release the ultimate road trip movie with commentary and abounds with, I genuinely believe that could have its own audience and its own kind of, a lot of people. That's my confidence, but
we'll see. We'll see someday.
Honestly, I was never really into Twitch, and it's only in the last year and discovering that it's being used. I mean, I like video games. I play video games, but I like that it's being used beyond that. And regular watcher. I mean, what my introduction to Planet Scum was George Lucas Talk Show. Now I watch Mary on Tuesdays and Chris on, popping up on Wednesdays and Saturday Night Live and so forth.
Yeah, it was never. I had never really had that much interaction with Twitch before we started doing it, and it was not something. I don't understand or appreciate the whole watching people play video games phenomenon. So this was definitely. It's kind of cool to we figured out how to push the boundaries of what people are doing on there, just figuring out the new things that we can do and the levels of interactivity that we can add to it. And it's been fun to figure that out over the last year while we've been not doing anything else with our lives.
But providing a very, very valuable service, I should point out. So essentially we've had the opening monologue, then we go to the adverts, and we've got Capri, we've got Finny Furniture Polish, we've got Rye Crisp, we've got Chevron, that wonderful animated advert from Chevron. Not much of a consistency. Well, I say not so much consistency, not much of a imagination for the for the artwork that pops up in between. Usually that is, I mean, I've got some screen grabs of some just specifically from 1979, and the screen grabs of the artwork that pops up, like in between adverts and stuff.
The more to come.
More to come.
Yeah.
Psychedelic. There could be a
I miss the age where, I mean, people get nostalgic for strange things, and it's not something that necessarily needs to come back, but I remember there being something comforting about the idea that a TV show had enough real estate on the air that they could afford to just have whole minutes go by where you just hear the band play while they promise more show will be back in a minute. It feels so leisurely to be able to just be like, we don't have ads here, we don't have show, we just want you to keep your TV on while this. It's like when you see old movie musicals and they have an overture or an intermission where it's just like the music playing in the movie theater.
Well, I mean, SNL is kind of the only one who still does that, and it's not for a minute or whatever, but it's for, you get the 15-second bumper of like, here's what's going on behind the scenes, but I feel like that's the only. There's no really other shows that do that kind of thing anymore.
Well, my dad's an illustrator, and he's been desperately trying to always have a cover on the New Yorker magazine, and I feel that maybe that's there's a slight connection there in terms of television and magazines. If you look at magazines, it's very rare, with the exception of, say, Mad Magazine, which sadly is now kind of but it's very rare to find a magazine, a regular magazine, consistent magazine, or that has an illustrated front cover.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And New Yorker arguably is probably one of the only, if not the only one left.
And television, despite the fact that there's more television than ever, illustration is not something that is featured. Like if you're an illustrator and you're looking to get your illustration on television, there's never been a worse time, I feel like, because everything's got to move so fast. There's no time to pause on an image,
Yeah.
Everything's like, got to get to the next thing. If people see a still image, the assumption is that something's gone wrong, if it lingers too long.
It's either animation that's confirmed that you're going into, or nothing. There's no middle ground there. There's no more to come screenshot opportunity in the same way.
Because the fear is that if you see an image on screen that says more to come, the viewer will just assume, I don't have time to wait, I will leave this channel and go find something that is moving.
Yeah, but it's interesting for me because watching all these great Tonight Show episodes, it makes me want to stick with it, because it's like, here it is. Granted, this specific episode, it's just all variations of the goat from the witch or the Vivitch saying happy birthday Aries, and that's it. That's it. There's not much of a variation in this specific episode, I must say, of those particular ones. But after that main ad break, Kermit comes back. I love the fact that he's got a smaller microphone, little kind of Kermit-sized mic. That's lovely. And there's a little bit of embarrassment over the fact that his hand was featured in the golf swing.
Yes.
That's referred to.
It was I saw it when it happened, and I was like, oh, I wonder if they're gonna call it out or just like let it go, because it's also something that like you can't retake that. Like that's all just been one unbroken shot the whole time. Like they would have to do the whole opening over again, and it was just funny that they just left it and were like, yeah, just go with it, it's fine.
Yeah, I think that there's a comfort in that in a weird way, though. It's like we know who we are, we know what we're doing, we've been on the show before, and I think for the most part, even though there does seem like to be a self-conscious reaction from Jim and arguably some of the, mainly Jim actually, I think, but I mean, even I love the fact that Ed's like trying to like ramp things up, and I think he's like one of my old Marine drinking buddies, and he's really like getting into it, and then they do the bit about helpful hints.
Yes.
Now this leads us on to our second part of the contest, of the competition.
Great.
Because believe it or not, that specific book That very specific book. It was called All Things Wise and Wonderful. It was released by the Pasadena Art Alliance in 1976. And I'll see if I can bring the photo up here if I can remember how to do this. Yes, here we go. Okay, so just going to bring that up. Yeah, we've got that one. We've done that. There we go. All Things Wise and Wonderful. So that's the book that they are reading. That's the original book that they are reading. How much do you think that is going for the buy it now price in dollars on eBay at the moment?
I'm gonna say $13.99.
$13.99.
I'll say $7.
$7?
Yeah.
Okay. $13.99 and $7. Let's find out. I'm going to stop sharing just so I can.
I hope it's like 700.
Oh, what? $29.22.
Sorry, Connor.
All right.
But
I'm bad at contest.
I should point out that the person who comes second. There's no losers here. There's only second. There's first and second. There's no losers here.
Okay.
Person who comes second, also will get. I'm going to show you. I'm going to tease you the prize.
Here we go.
The prize for the person who comes second.
The loser, yeah.
Yeah.
Almost gotcha.
The additional winner.
Oh wow.
Oh, that's better.
Yeah, this is pretty good.
Oh, wow, so much more.
Oh.
And
oh man.
And they all have the bubble gum in still.
Yum yum.
So then the person the person who gets it has to eat the bubble gum. That's the rule.
What did we do that at Hell's Kitchen?
I think so.
We gave away a pack of gum at one of our shows, and we told the person that they had to eat the gum.
I think it was Howard the Duck. I believe it was Howard the Duck cards, and we're like, you have to eat the gum. If you're taking this prize, you have to eat the gum. And it was like 35-year-old gum.
And they said it was very terrible.
Did they have it? Did they chew on it?
Oh yeah. We don't listen, George, we don't tell people they have to do something and then say, never mind. It's okay if you don't. We're making them do it, you know?
I'm going to tell you something which, funnily enough, actually does unintentionally connect to something else. So when I was a kid, I used to collect these spitting image trading cards.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 6 years old, the very bright pink bubble gum that came in the cards, I was convinced that I'd never ate it because I was convinced that I'd become a spitting image puppet if I had one. I was 6 years old. That was my logic behind it. I was terrified of having it. So I never had the chewing gum, the bubble gum. But I do own, as it's probably common knowledge now, I do have, it's not a very little reachy, I'll be honest with you, but I do have Mickey Delenz nearby. That's me.
With Molten Mickey?
Mulchin Mickey.
That does make a lot of sense as a sort of like origin story for how the spitted image puppets came to exist. They do, if you think of them that way, it's like these started out as just children who ate spitting image gum and they turned into puppets. These grotesque things.
I feel that might have been a dream I had when I was 6. I feel that might have been. I feel that might have been something that actually happened in my head because, there was a spitting image museum in Covent Garden.
Yes, I remember this. Yeah, I went there. I'm just now remembering I went there, and I don't remember anything about it, but I know I went.
I've got a photo that I'm pretty sure I've shared separately. I haven't got it available at hand, but it's me at 6 years old holding up the original Ronald Reagan puppet.
Insane.
And I was 6 years old, and honestly, that's how I learned about the news when I was a kid. Like, you know, it didn't make any of them better or worse. It was just the way of knowing the names of the people. Like,
I mean, that's me with SNL. Like, you know, there's people, you know, who you only know where I'm like, oh, of course. Well, Timothy Geithner, I mean, he's Will Forte. You know what I mean? Like, I just know these like political names based on who played them on SNL. I didn't know anything about them in real life.
Well, I suppose in relation to that, I do have a question from my good friend Ethan Runn, and this was his one question. And he wanted me to ask you guys, if Kermit is Carson, which Muppet represents which talk show host?
Whoa.
Following on from Carson.
Wow. Following on from Carson, meaning like, then we're going to Jay and everybody from there?
Letterman, like anyone you like.
Okay.
Letterman,
I didn't know
Conan.
if we were just going.
Yeah. So let's assume Conan's Kermit, but sorry, not Conan. Sorry.
I don't think this necessarily holds up, but I'm just imagining Beauregard hiding in the closet, listening to, they're talking about whether I'll be on the show anymore.
Does that make Helen Kushnick Uncle Deadly?
Maybe.
Oh. Now, gosh, is Gonzo a Letterman, or is Gonzo sort of like a Craig Ferguson-y or Conan-y, I guess? I'm trying to figure out who. Maybe Craig Ferguson?
I feel like James Corden's Sam.
Oh, interesting. I was going to say Comedy Central Colbert is Sam, but that feels like the obvious one. Connor, who did we do this to recently? Didn't we Muppet cast something recently?
We did something. There's a part of me that's imagining Sam as Greg Gutfeld, just because it lines up politically, but persona-wise, they don't line up. What did we do with the Muppets where we cast them in something? I'm trying to remember.
I know.
Also, in the meantime, I should point out is that I can't think of a Muppet that you can't love, I have an affection for. I think that's ultimately the key to the Muppets, is that there's no Muppet you can say, I don't like that Muppet.
Some people don't like Scred.
Yeah.
Do you know Scred, George?
I know the name.
The Land of Gorch segments in the first year of Saturday Night Live, which is right before the Muppet Show. And there's a lot of cuckolding. It's a lot of cuckolding based humor, which is Scred. That's what we did. We did Studio 60.
We Muppet cast Studio 60.
Right.
And we went like real deep on it. Like we went like way, way down on it.
There was an idea, and I think the pandemic may have, not that this was ever going to happen, but there was a period where Patrick and I were talking about, when they were talking about, they should reboot the Muppet Show. And, the Muppet Show was always like a throwback to vaudeville. It was always a little bit. And then people have tried, there have been attempts to like Muppet TV, Muppet Television, things where let's try to update it to something else. And use a way to make it work. But the idea that really appealed to me, if you were going to do a modern reboot, because the new like Muppets Now has been like viral videos. Like, what if the Muppets are doing like YouTube videos, basically? But I had this notion of having the Muppets basically open a UCB style comedy theater in school. So you'd basically have like the show would be like ASCAT. That's where you get your host in, and it would be like, but you'd have like Fozzie teaching like sketch writing, and that you'd basically have the same thing in the theater, but you'd also have the learning and teaching about show business angle. I still feel like that's a good idea, although there's so many concepts that I feel like now it'll be years before they make sense as a normal base. Like the base reality of everything has been so thrown into pieces that it's hard to figure when stuff will feel normal. An idea will feel normal and not weird.
So I suppose on that level, which Muppet would represent Will Hines?
Dr. Benson Honeydew.
That's Honeydew.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Good.
Yeah.
They have this similar sort of demeanor, certainly.
Yeah. I when he popped up in Search Party, I genuinely thought the photo would go somewhere in terms of like them getting caught out, but it didn't. I was intrigued about that, but I only because I got into Search Party after discovering that there were certain connections with George Lucas Talk Show, and I've been thoroughly enjoying it. Looking forward to the new series.
I'm still trying to think of good castings for these talk show hosts. I'm still going through in my head. I'm like looking at
who would be Chevy Chase.
Whoa. I mean, I don't want to. Maybe
would,
like a.
Who would fit this hat? Who would fit this helmet?
I was gonna say.
I mean, a big doozer, certainly.
Imagine meeting Chevy Chase and being like, "You're just a big doozer, Chevy."
I'm trying to think. It's hard because, one of the things that's hard about this is the likability of most Muppets, and it's hard to figure out which Muppet is Chevy because of that. Because certainly, like, in terms of it being a comedy disaster, in terms of it going wrong, Fozzie's the Chevy. You know that, like, it's easy to imagine Fozzie's show lasting not very long.
Some people love him, some people hate him.
I almost feel, though, that in that kind of scenario, Fozzie would almost end up being a Hank Kingsley. Because that's kind of, I mean, the thing is that if Ed wasn't there in the episode, Fozzie would be the Ed.
I mean, that's kind of what Fozzie is in the 2015 ABC show. He's the announcer and sidekick for Piggy's talk show.
Yeah.
And he sort of fills that role. Yeah, I mean, Fozzie's not a bad Chevy. Maybe like a Link Hogthrob.
Oh yeah, attitude wise, Link is definitely a Chevy.
Yeah.
Let's go completely ridiculous meta. Who would be the best Rip Torn? Who would be Artie from Larry as a Muppet?
Who's the owner of the theater?
JP Gross.
JP Gross.
That'd be him.
Here's my maybe out of left field take.
Right. Pepe is Rip Torn as Artie.
Pepe is Rip Torn as Artie.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
I don't know why.
You gotta drink a salty dog, okay?
Yeah, he's kind of like, he's a little gruff. People love him. He's got away with the ladies. He
slept with Angie Dickinson.
With Angie Dickinson, yeah. That big part of Pepe's backstory. I don't know. That was the first one that popped into my head.
I tell you what, the thing is that what I'm loving about this reboot of this podcast is that I'm going to be covering so much weird and wonderful things, and we're gonna. I mean, like, for example, Vincent Price is coming up very shortly not on this specific episode on the Tonight Show, not on this recording of this podcast. Like, he only recorded one film that year, and it was Scavenger Hunt. And a friend of mine and I are going to be recording an insight into that film. Scavenger Hunt was basically the 70s version of It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And it was directed by the same chap who directed Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. He also directed The Jerk 2, which connects us to our next guest. And he also directed certain episodes of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
Wow.
Still alive.
What's this guy's name?
His name, I'm going to bring it up now. Let's have a look. His name is it's Michael Schultz. Michael Schultz.
Yeah, I just googled him.
Yeah.
Wait,
what a fascinating.
I just googled The Jerk 2.
Yeah.
And it says the screenplay. Oh, characters. It said screenplay was credited to Steve Martin, but it was just for characters.
I have it on DVD somewhere buried, and I haven't watched it yet. I'm slightly scared. I do have the original Little Richie there, just the original DVD. But,
yeah, there you go.
Of course. But yeah, I love the fact that this is what I'm enjoying about with exploring in the series, is that every guest that comes on has some kind of a background, some kind of a story. There's a connecting point. There's a kind of a key point. Everyone, there's a lot of things going on at that point. And specifically, the reason we've chosen 1979 for the first season of the talk shows because you've got the 60 minutes episode of Johnny Carson, which is very influenced in the Larry Sanders episode where he's interviewed, and you can instantly see the Ed and Johnny behind the scenes.
I don't think I've ever seen that 60 Minutes interview. I'll have to find that.
Well, it's so it was meant to be 60 minutes in total, but it's only 30 minutes because they started recording it on Johnny's request about a year or so before. And then he decided he didn't want to do it anymore. So then he contacted them in 1979 saying, yeah, I'd like to finish this off now. And so it's only about half an hour long. And it's like him doing like magic tricks with the interviewer and like having a conversation. Sure. It's on YouTube. But I'll send a link.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see it.
It's very interesting. But also it was the first year that Johnny hosted the Oscars. He's off for most of the time as well, and it's just a really interesting year for various people. I mean, for example, one of the recurring guests on the show is Burt Reynolds, who pops up in the Orson Welles pilot episode, and Orson Welles, of course, pops up in the advert sober in this recording of the Paul Masson wine. The French. It's purely just
he's doing okay in this one.
He's doing all right.
And also in that Orson Welles pilot episode, aren't Henson and Oz in that too? Yeah,
it's a big crossover. And also the fact that somehow Orson and Burt Reynolds are wearing the same clothes at the same time. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack. And the thing is that Simon Callow has released this wonderful series of biographies in parts about Orson Welles, and I've got the first book that I've just about finished, but nowhere near sort of the 70s, and sort of where it's going. And I've just ordered the second book, and I don't even think the third book, which is out, has reached that point yet. So I believe he has been writing the fourth and final book during lockdown. But it's going to be interesting to watch, to read Simon Callow describe Orson Welles in the Transformers film, doing a voiceover. Because Simon Callow is a general kind of, I know him best from Four Weddings and a Funeral and doing Dickens and so forth. But the idea of Simon Callow doing the audiobook for Orson Welles Orson Welles, Volume 4, talking about Transformers the movie. It just sounds like a really weird concept in my head. But I suppose we should continue with the. But for the record, by the way, I'm very grateful for your time, and I really hope I'm not absorbing it with.
No, you're good.
It's a joy.
Well, if you know anything about us, you know that we love a good meandering conversation. That's the reason why our short shows are so very long.
Well, it's kind of our thing at this point.
I aim to please, you know what? And, if put it this way, if we end up going out through to a 3-parter, then that saves me having to record 2 more shows, to be honest.
So be it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that this also, us going long is something that I was talking to Connor before the recording about how insane it is that this show used to be 90 minutes. Like having to book that many guests every night of the week, it makes sense why they would have like Rickles come on, like, when they're like, Don Rickles was on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show 350 times. And you're like, how could that be possible? And it's like, well, because they needed to get so many guests every time. There's like 5 guests in this episode. It's insane. So I think,
I also think that, the shows, there's a weird balance of things because there's no question that 90 minutes was long for the Tonight Show, and that they probably felt that they were making better shows when it was an hour. It probably was like they didn't miss it.
Yeah.
But there's also a thing, and you're far from this point in your watching of the Gethard Show, but like when the Chris Gethard Show became a real TV show. Well, first of all, when it was on MNN, it was a real hour, which is longer than most modern talk shows because most of them are an hour, including commercials. And there was a big difference between like a 40-minute show and a 60-minute show. It's a third longer, You can just fit a lot more things that you can't fit on. Like when people are like, what's of the many things that are different between the Chris Gethard Show and a normal TV talk show, one of them is that extra 20 minutes makes a huge difference in a show. And then when it moved to actual television, my job was to be the warm-up comic. And people would watch a live stream of the taping when it was on Fusion in its first season in particular, and it was a half-hour show on the network. But the show experience that people would have watching the live stream of the taping would be hours long. It would be much closer to the length of a George Lucas talk show live stream than an actual episode of The Gavin Show. And it was much to the frustration, I think, of Chris and the people who were putting so much work into making the half-hour show really good, is knowing that most of the fan base was like, we would rather watch you guys stumble around for 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever, because we get everything that makes it into the show, but we get all these other like weird, awkward elements. And like, even watching this 90-minute show, like if you were to tighten it up, and you could, it would be very easy to tighten up, you'd probably lose a lot of the charm. You know, there is something about the fact, for instance, that like guests get more than one segment. I really miss that on a lot of talk shows. You get a really good guest and they're on for one segment and that's it. And I think a lot of that, you know, there's a reason why, like, I think Graham Norton clips tend to go so viral. It's because that's a show that actually values unscripted conversations and interactions where people are actually mixing it up with each other, you know?
Yeah. Anecdotal, actual conversations. It's not relying solely on parlor games. Essentially, it's.
I think Graham Norton is one of the great modern talk show hosts. He's just like he's sharp and he's listening, and you know, like, and it doesn't feel like it's a show that's been polished so that all of the rough edges are gone, you know?
And I get the impression, like, if you can, I mean, not to completely denounce Corden, but I get the impression that Graham Norton has the time to care. Like, I feel that with Corden, like, whether he wants to or not, he's rushed. And
and some of that's the gig of, like, it's crazy to me that, to me, it feels like the whole point of being on an hour later is to be less polished and to be less, like, the later you get in the schedule, you should have more freedom to be rough around the edges. I remember there was my favorite era, the era I'm most personally nostalgic for of late night talk shows, is when you had Carson followed by Letterman, followed by a show called Later with Bob Costas. And one of the things that and Later with Bob Costas was an edited, pre-taped talk show with no audience. It was him and another guest in a chair. It was a half hour long. And there was an episode that he recorded with Richard Lewis that he was unable to release because he laughed too hard. And he had Richard Lewis back, and they just showed clips from the episode that was they were unable to use. And it's Richard Lewis being funny and Bob Costas doubling over, literally at some points falling out of the chair in pain because he's laughing so hard. And it just feels like this other shows, even really good talk shows, are not built for that kind of like enjoyment. Like there's a cap on how fun it can be sometimes.
That episode is on YouTube. Don Giller, the Letterman guy on YouTube, has uploaded that Richard Lewis on Costas.
Ooh.
I'll tell you what, not to spoil too much about my presidential campaign, but had I been elected president, I would have given Don Geller the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I would have said, just for uploading all these talk shows to YouTube, I'd be like, he's getting one of the medals. We're giving it to him. We're giving it to Don Geller. What a nice amount of work that he's put into making these fun things available for people to see.
Oh, he's an absolute life source for this show, for reference as well. And I saw my dad for the first time in 7 months this month, and got him to come over, and we and I introduced him. I showed him just the collection of Don Giller compilation of Peter O'Toole interviews.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one.
And it's got the Richard Harris ones in there as well.
Yeah.
I thought I learned kind of about the idea of the Hellraiser actors and everything from my dad, but he was saying they're watching it like for the first time, going, "Oh, I love this. What's this about?" And I also showed him the Quentin Crisp one, and with the Letterman interviews, and he'd painted Quentin Crisp years and years and years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting to him. So that was the sort of lead into. But what really interested me with the Peter O'Toole one was I didn't realize that famous one with the camel entrance was actually Letterman in London. I didn't realize that was one of the ones from. It makes me think that maybe Don has the fact that he can make these amount of clip compilations. It's like, oh, you've got the gold, you've got all of it, you've got all of this.
Now, I wish he would just start releasing full episodes. Like, I wish he would not. I know that it's probably a nightmare with music stuff, and he's purposefully cutting around specific things to, like, you know, not get flagged by the YouTube robots. But there is so much stuff that
it's also just so sad that the companies that actually own this material are not the ones who are invested in preserving it in a lot of cases. In some cases they are, you know, like I think that because I think, you know, like I have, you know, uploaded this Tonight Show featuring the Muppets to YouTube. And it could get pulled any second now. Like it could be gone 2 seconds from now.
Yeah.
I think if, you know, I don't know what it would take to have this officially released in a, you know, preserved fashion where, you know, like, I don't know what it would take. I mean, the first thing is you'd lose the commercials, which are a lot of the fun of it. They really give you the experience of what the show actually was to people who viewed it. But like, there's no question that like Muppet fans, if this came out on a Blu-ray or something, that Muppet fans would buy it. It's not that there wouldn't be a demand for it. Muppet fans would lose their minds if this was available, but it's also not the kind of thing it's not going to show up on Disney Plus. Like Disney Plus have been great about putting almost all of the Muppet shows up, but this is too weird a thing to exist in an official capacity. It's also just, and this is one of the things that I think makes it great for Muppet fans. The audience for this episode was not children, and there are jokes in this episode that I wouldn't have understood as a kid, and it's sort of, wow, this is like the late night. This is After Dark with the Muppets. They are fully in adult conversation mode. They're not pandering at all, and it works. You know.
Yeah.
Dr. Michael Fox amplifies the. He brings up the levels. He's a great improviser. Like, he comes out and he's storming down.
I'll also say, you know, it's interesting because Vincent Price. It's fascinating as a comedy person to analyze what works and what doesn't. And Vincent Price, he seems to think like that like Ace in the Hole is going to be, he has a sense of there's something funny about talking about vegetarianism versus eating pig's feet, like to these Muppets. He has it in his mind that there's something funny about this, but he hasn't fully figured it out. And it kind of is like watching me try to play any sport, like watching Vincent Price sort of fumble this, like, I know there's something funny about me saying, like, because he also says one of the recipes is pickled pig's feet, and Kermit's horrified by it. And then he's like, well, it's actually not really good. It's actually not a good recipe. And you're like, oh, so it's kind of a long walk to bring it up because you're only bringing it up to get a reaction.
That interview specifically is interesting because it feels like him and Henson want to be on the same page, and they're both trying to be on the same page, but they're like both just off by like 5%, and it makes the interview not go well. You know what I mean? Like, they're so close to being simpatico, and they're not.
Well, one thing that's interesting is, and this is something that I've encountered doing various bits. Like when I was doing the bit on the Chris Gethard show where I ran for president, a lot of people wanted to play along with that by saying, like, I'll be your opponent and I'll run an attack ad against you. And I was always like, I actually don't need that. It's actually better. The bit works better if people play along with it as if I have a chance, or where it's like, it works better if you endorse me than if you say you're never going to be president, because that sort of undermines, like, of course I'm not going to be president. Sort of undermines the bit. And in a way, like Vincent Price going for the gag of like pickled pig's feet, it sort of like doesn't make sense because he likes the Muppets and he wouldn't bring that up and he doesn't need to. Like it's an interesting thing because like every now and then, very rarely, we would get a guest on the George Lucas talk show who would like make something up. And it was always kind of a bummer because it's like, actually, it's just better if we always tell the guests, like, just interact with George as if you're meeting the real George Lucas and sort of just treat it like that. And sometimes people would sort of go out of their way to like make up a thing that didn't happen. And like, well, it kind of doesn't work because you're sort of like, I'm already not really George Lucas. So for you to like do something that isn't true, it's sort of like it's like magnets like pushing at each other. And it's interesting to watch because the animal guy, the guy who comes out who wants to talk about genetics and mating calls of frogs, he sort of has a better go of it because he's actually like, I'm going to talk to these animals about like actual animal things and get their like sincere reactions to these things, and it's sort of like playing along versus thinking that the funny thing will be to fight it or to play against it, that in some ways Vincent Price, not being a comedian, like didn't realize that he didn't need to do anything except be Vincent Price with them, and the connections will happen naturally. He doesn't need to force like, I have a cookbook and I'm going to bring up pickled pig's feet. It's like, well, that's not in your cookbook. You're just saying that. It's almost like going out of your way to say like, what's the most hurtful or offensive thing you could say to Miss Piggy? Yeah. And it's sort of like, it's like those are the jokes that sometimes you'll have in your head and you'll realize it's actually not worth the amount of energy it takes to establish why you're saying it in the first place.
And it is weird because he is funny and he's normally like a fairly good talk show guest. Like he's usually like on top of it and like can make it work while still being in his persona of the, the creepy, guy. But for some reason, this one just doesn't. And I should also say his episode of The Muppet Show is one of my favorite episodes of The Muppet Show. Well, so like they do have a good chemistry and it is there.
I do feel that I think that might be the main issue is that arguably about 3/4 of the guests on this episode are there primarily for moral support on the basis of having been involved with the Muppets. And so they haven't got much to bring that's new to the table, which is why you have Bernadette Peters reperforming the song with Robin. And, it's kind of like this is a refresher before the film comes out in many respects. And, and even the clip that they show of the Muppets, the Muppet movie is Steve Martin. And I mean, I got to say with that particular clip, isn't it great to hear an audience react to that?
I said that exact thing to my roommate. I'm like, it's so weird hearing a laugh track to this because people are rolling in the gosh darn aisles. Like they're like eating that clip up. It's a very funny clip.
Yeah.
But like, it's so even like Connor and I have seen that movie in a movie theater together. We saw it at the Museum of Moving Image 2 years ago or whatever at this point. And like people laugh a lot, like it's a fun movie to see, but it's wild hearing that audience go for it because they're like all in because it's peak Muppet time, peak Steve Martin time, peak like it's everyone at the top of their game and everyone loving Muppets and Steve Martin.
It would have been great to see, like, if you could rebook this episode, Don Rickles would have been like a perfect guest.
Sure.
Like he would have come out, he would have said, like, he would have complained about how, like, I don't get Johnny, I get the frog, like he would have been, like, you could hear, he would have roasted the Muppets and it would have been great to see that interaction at that particular time. Charles Grodin would have been another person that would have been like a great, like it almost is like, you're right. The fact that like Vincent Price is like, well, we did our episode and now here we are. Yeah. It would have been great to get like, well, who are but it also may not have been allowed to do that. Like it may have also been a thing where it's like, there may have been directives from the show or from the network being like, you can't have the guests who we're going to need when Johnny's back.
Because those 3 guests, I would say, are probably not A-tier guests at that point. You know what I mean? Like they're not they're all famous people, but they're not, movie stars at that point.
79 was very quiet for those guys as well. Vincent Price, all he had at that time, not to knock him, I did count this. He actually name drops at least 6 films that he'd done in the 70s.
Oh, that's the thing that Henson keeps asking him. He's like, well, what else? What other movies? Give us some other movie titles. Keep doing that. Give us another one. Like he keeps bringing that up.
What else have you died in? And I did love something that I only learned from watching this episode. One of my favorite films, Theatre of Blood. I didn't realize that Coral Brown is the is the actress. Wife? Yeah, and she's the one who gets electrocuted. Spoiler alert. Theatre of Blood, really good, by the way. If you're a fan of, also it has.
I've seen Theatre of Blood. I'm a big Vincent Price guy. I don't think I've seen Theatre of Blood.
I tell you, if you get the Arrow edition, which I think have now branched out to Region 1 in the US, it comes with a commentary by the comedy troupe, The League of Gentlemen, and which is great. But it's my favorite, 100%.
Oh wow, I'll have to look that.
I don't know, maybe it'll be a prize, or alternatively, maybe the winner will go away tonight with it only gets to 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is the only important time in Chevy's world.
Is that legitimately on the table for a prize? Because I'll tell you this, there's no way. I don't think I'm going to win this. But if I did win that, I would just give it to Patrick, because it genuinely, there are a few things in this world that I've looked at and immediately thought, like, that looks as much like it already belongs to Patrick as if you'd held up Patrick's firstborn son. I would have been like, I can't have that as a prize. Rumpelstiltskin, I can't.
Oh boy.
The thing is, whoever wins tonight, and any other guest is welcome to join. I will be doing an episode about the Chevy Chase show, and I sincerely hope that anyone is welcome to join. It won't be anytime soon.
Hey now.
Patrick, do you still own a clock with my face on it?
I do.
Yeah, that's also part of it. Like, you don't think it works? It
It
absolutely does. You got to put a battery in it.
I probably have to put a battery in.
Put a battery in it, Patrick.
Connor,
it is the one that you know about, George.
The clock that was for the presidency.
Yes.
It is that exact clock. I have that exact clock.
I also, because when I was doing these bits, I set up a cafe press store where I make no money off of anything. I just wanted people. It was more important to me that people would pay the base price, like the lowest possible price, because I was more invested in people like having shirts or merch. Like, I just wanted to see people have swag, that was related to me. And so I never made any money, but I also never got any contacts about, here are the sales, because like I basically looped myself out of it. And that store is still live a decade later. And you can buy that clock for $12.
Sold.
That's pretty cheap.
I'll buy it.
Honestly, there's if you go to cafepress.com, 35 Ratliff 2012, there is an array of merchandise that I have not looked at. What I will say is
Isn't there a Speedo? There's a thong?
There's a Speedo. There's a little teddy bear who wears a little shirt. There's a shirt for a dog.
A teddy wearing a Speedo. Yeah.
I will say that the thing I recommend the most highly, the thing that I would say, like, this is the thing, and it's expensive, but I might buy myself another one, is the Ratliff 35 2012 Stadium blanket.
Yeah.
The throw blanket. It's $53.49. Do I have it here? Do I? Hold on.
I will put a link into the store. When this episode comes out, I will put a link to the store.
I think I have it, but it's folded under things.
And I'm branching out to Patreon. So if my Patreon gets enough subscribers, I will buy that and as well.
Yeah.
When winter arrives, this blanket, at least if it's made of the same material that was a decade ago, was so genuinely comfortable, so like warm and fuzzy and great.
Yeah.
I make no money off of any of it, but there's a lot of items for sale.
Can I use that audio to promote it?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I got no dog in this fight. It's just a functioning store that I have no connection to anymore, but it's all campaign paraphernalia from a long ago presidential novelty campaign in the age when such a concept was amusing rather than horrifying because no novelty candidates had yet won the actual presidency.
Mm-hmm.
It was not yet a ruined comedic conceit.
I think we got a clear recording of that, so I'm going to make sure that that's applied for the advertising.
Do with it what you will. Make your own commercial for it. Whatever you
your
want.
worst. I give you my blessing.
Okay, hang on. We need to get back because we're still in Vincent Price, and there are four other guests.
This is true.
Well, I think we can rattle through these real quick though.
Oh yeah, sure. But one thing I should point out before we move away from Vincent Price is that he does provide 3 actually genuinely good tips for being a good horror actor, and he says deep voice, speak. Four. Deep voice, speak well, blue eyes, fiendish laugh.
Yeah.
Now I've already lost out on the blue eyes. I don't have the blue eyes.
I do not either.
I'm the closest. Mine are green gray, but sometimes people tell me they look blue.
So in this example, you're the closest to Vincent Price's idea of a perfect horror actor.
Yeah.
Can we hear your laugh? That's pretty good.
Yeah. Approved.
Did I win something? Was that one of the things? One of the 6 things?
I do also on top of these, I do also have a Pee Wee Herman one, so maybe I'll squeeze that in for good measure. If
there you go.
I can't get this is for just talking about a little reachy, but this is my most recent purchase, which is the Tex Avery box set, French.
Wow.
That came through, so I was happy with that.
I have the individual Blu-rays that have come out of that Warner Archive has been putting out of Tex Avery, but I'm not familiar with that box set.
It's from well, it says AL, so it's from Al, from the Netherlands.
Bundy.
Oh.
Well, I don't know. Chevy Chase connection again.
Hey, you can call those DVDs Al.
Yeah. Honestly, if Chevy Chase introduces, I would pay extra if this was re-released with Chevy Chase doing an introduction.
I would argue a lot of those Chevy Chase movies from that time period are basically him doing the Awuga Wolf. You know.
Well, could we get Chevy Chase like kind of doing like a Log Lady introduction, like the Log Lady did with Twin Peaks, but for various Tex Avery cartoons? That'd be an interesting.
I think I could imagine what his because I feel like anytime I've ever seen Chevy Chase talking about like people he considers to be like comedy geniuses, it's usually some measure of him like saying like Tex Avery of course was a genius like me. He'd sort of like throw in he was always a way of like inserting himself into the sentence as well, where he'd talk about like Ernie Kovacs or something, but then say like also me, I'm the I am also a genius.
Yeah, so I suppose that leads us on to the talk show Tat Volume 3, which so we're halfway through, and I'll share this screen now. Where are we? There we go. Okay, so this is number 3.
Ooh.
Now, Kermit actually does reference a wristwatch. He says he references himself being, apparently this is from 1979. It's mentioned on there as well. So it almost seems like a kind of a slightly subtle plug for him to have mentioned the wristwatch. Or either that or by him saying it, Pico went, "Oh, let's get involved." But how much do you reckon that specific one is going for on eBay?
Go ahead.
I'll tell you this much: it's not the only one that's available.
Okay. Are there a lot available, or
I'd say about three.
Three.
About three.
Okay.
Yeah, about 2 or 3.
But we're guessing this specific price.
Yeah, I'm gonna say $35.
Okay.
I'm gonna say $50.
All right. So Kermit the Frog. So for those listening, Kermit the Frog, a Jim Henson Muppet Watch, released by Pico. 7 jewels from the Henson Associates Incorporated from 1979. Beautiful green on green strap.
Mm-hmm.
The value is $89.99. So Connor, it's 2-1 right now, and then we've got 3 more chances. It could go either way.
Okay.
At this point,
you said 7 jewels.
7 jewels. Yeah,
wow.
I don't know where they are. I think they might be in the box, separate, loose from the watch.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, jewels are a very important thing to Muppet fans, Lady Holiday and such.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. Baseball diamond.
Yeah, in the Mallory Gallery.
I did get the mild impression that, bearing in mind we're only 3 out of the 6, I did get the impression that even if like you didn't guess them correctly, that I was pretty certain that at least one of you would probably be bidding on it by the end of the recording, or at least one of them in some capacity.
We'll see.
I know for a fact that there's at least one thing coming up that I'm pretty sure from my listening to 12-Hour Day podcasts that Connor might already have.
Oh, okay.
All right. But that doesn't mean I know it's worth.
Or at least the expectancy of the specific
right. Vendor. Yeah.
But this is the thing for me. eBay isn't so much a place where I buy anything. It's just this gorgeous gallery of things that exist, and it's just nice to know they exist.
The pandemic has changed that for me. I used to be like that, and now I'm just buying everything. Which is not good.
Here's the thing. I want to get all the Johnny Carson clothes. I want to get his jackets.
Sure.
I want to get the large cross stitch. One of my favorite moments in 2016 when I was in New York, I was at an Airbnb. I came out of Brooklyn with my mate Jonathan. I didn't turn around, but I heard a guy. I was wearing my red jacket. Usually goes with all this. What I'm wearing now. I'm wearing my red cross stitch jacket, and I heard a guy go da 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 da, and I was like, I'm gonna assume that was for me, and I'll take that. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, that's great.
And I was like, that's what I'm working for. So I'll go for that. But there's some to like Johnny Carson pajamas that are like kind of like the very kind of salmon pink. They're on eBay. They've been on there for a while.
His real pajamas?
Well, I think his brand of pajamas, not like
brand.
Yeah, not Carson screen worn pajamas. No.
I think he did a lot of bedtime sketches on the Tonight Show in the 70s. I think.
I think that should have been something they injected like secretly in at 3 a.m. shift. Just Carson, like kind of like in his PJs reading a bedtime story for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, a lot of Aunt Blabby tucks herself in for the night sketches.
Just pops in. Ed McMahon, like you could do like a Morecambe and Wise, like Johnny and Ed going to bed together, just like sitting up,
there you go,
reading a bedtime story. That'd be great.
Yeah.